So the Sufi state, be outwardly sober and be inwardly ecstatic. And what I wanted to do today was to talk about this and how we can use this teaching to live much more balanced and harmonious lives, and really to fully integrate our spiritual experiences into our daily existence, so that we're living an actual reality as opposed to something we've read in a book. Now, the motivation and the reasoning behind this particular video is I was having a conversation with a dear friend, and it was evident during the conversation that here was a person who was experiencing something, had some awakening, some glimpses, but was kind of coming in and out of this reality. And it was playing a bit of havoc, with what was going on. And it's something I've seen happen in my life as well. So what I'll be doing really is just kind of narrating some personal experiences as well. And just some kind of pointers or just some suggestions as to how we can prevent that happening. I remember when I had my first awakening, the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go out and I wanted to teach. I wanted to tell people. I wasn't done, cooked, whatever you want to say, or I'd even completed my journey, but I was really enthusiastic about this, and I wanted to go out and I really wanted to help people, and I wanted to tell them about this thing, this non-duality. And what I found was I was very enthusiastic. I remember talking to people on Facebook, sending messages, what have you, really being proactive. And it didn't really work. It just alienated me from a lot of people, because I just came across as this weirdo. Because what happens is sometimes we get this glimpse, and what we want to do is we want to go out there, we want to help people, we want to try and fix them, we want to impose our viewpoint on them. And again, like I said, I've been guilty of most of these points that I'm making. And the reason for that is, I think, going back to the whole Sufi saying, the Sufis believe that there's these two realities. There's a Zahir, which is an external reality, and then there's a Batin, which is this internal reality. And if we can remain sober in the world and yet inwardly be ecstatic, we're living in a place of balance whereby we can go on with our day-to-day existence. One of the sayings that I love quoting is a Sufi saying which states that, granted the world is an illusion, but we still have to live in it. When we are unable to control or integrate our experiences into our day-to-day existence, then we do make the mistake of sometimes going out there and alienating people, whether it's family, friends, community. And it's something then that we have to go back and correct. I absolutely love the story of Byron Katie, who created the work, and how after awakening and after it had been integrated, she had to go back and really sort out a lot of relationships. And that's something that I'm at the moment in a bit of a process of doing, because of the fact that in my ecstatic states, I've said stuff and done stuff, and it's all been for the benefit of that other person, and I'm really trying to help you and you don't understand. Maybe it was that I didn't understand, or maybe it's that we don't understand, and maybe it's that we haven't really fully integrated and realize that sometimes life is about just living a perfectly ordinary life while experiencing this. So we're living from a practical reality which tells us when we should speak and when we should be silent. And if we can take this saying of be outwardly sober but inwardly ecstatic, we may find that we may not have to go out there and talk to people. There's a beautiful Arabic saying which states that speak only if your words are more beautiful than the silence. So if we were to attach that to this saying and to really think about, are my words more beautiful than silence, we may find that it helps us with integrating our experiences, and it also prevents us from going and speaking to someone and saying something untoward because we're as high as a kite, or we're blissed out. And yes, I understand that these things happen, and I understand that it is what it is, because that just seems to be such a lovely statement to get us out of jail whenever we mess up. But maybe if we really start looking at this and realize that spirituality is about balance, it's about living our lives in the truest, most fullest way possible, and being valued members of our community, and being able to help people. But simultaneously, it also means recognizing that this is all illusory and that we are really just in this ocean of consciousness. And maintaining that balance allows us to be fully integrated in what actually is, because there are times we may need to speak and there are times when it is best to remain silent. And realizing that comes from this place of balance, that yes, there are times to speak about this, and yes, there are times not to speak about this. And like I said, like many other people, I've been guilty of this and have caused a lot of damage to a lot of people, you know, because I'd had an awakening and I wanted to go out there, I wanted to talk to people. And what I found over the years now, that this becomes more and more ordinary and it becomes more and more simpler. And that's where its power lies, if at all, you know, we need to even speak about that. And after a while, we don't need to speak about the ordinary sort of simplicity. It is simply just life happening in the most beautiful, pristine way. And when we can see that, what we can see is we can live from this place, this center, this place of balance, this place of real integration, in which we are mindful of how we conduct ourselves, and yet ultimately we realize that it is illusory and we have to live in it. But really our true nature is this ocean entire. And this balance doesn't require us to understand or to do any techniques or methods, but just really just be present in our lives. Because as I said in my last video, sometimes helping someone can be as simple as just sitting with them in their pain, or just really just being present, instead of trying to impose our view on people or say that we know something that they don't, because there does tend to be a spiritual arrogance. And sometimes I you know, and like I said, I'm guilty of it myself. We do like to take the pulpit and preach down to these unconscious people about how they shouldn't be doing this or should not be doing that. Well, if they are consciousness, then maybe they're playing their play out as well. And in that sense, what can happen is over time we become less judgmental, and we find that we fall more and more into silence, because, you know, we find that there isn't really anything as beautiful as this silence. And in that silence we live. You know, I've recently been talking to friends about when I was growing up, I would sit in this room with some old men, and they would just sit there silently, and, you know, they'd have their cup of tea, there'd be a bit of a conversation, and then they'd go back to living their lives. And I truly believe that I was witnessing something beautiful and incredible, and I was in the company of people who had really realized what it meant to be human, but didn't feel the need to do videos, you know, or to write books or to do meetings, but just live in their communities and be the best possible husband or the best possible friend or the best possible brother they could possibly be. And as I said recently, you know, there was no methodology, there was no Sufism or non-duality or Buddhism. There were just these people living. And I truly feel that these people had attained this balance whereby, yes, they worked in the jobs that they worked, and yet occasionally life brought them into a room, and they would just sit there silently with this beautiful conversation. And, you know, I've now moved on from there, but I can't forget, you know, I was a young child. I wanted to play out on the street, but instead I was sitting in this room with these old men who were incredible. There isn't really any other word for it. And it's incredible how when we move on, we start realizing that this reality that we're seeking for in books or we're trying to find in satsangs has always been there. And sometimes it's presented itself in the most simplest of experiences. And there were no ecstatic outpourings. There were just people just sitting there. And I think in that sense, if we allow ourselves to move through the world in this state of soberness, doing what we need to do in the world, and yet inwardly recognize that our inherent nature is the universe entire, then we attain that balance, and we are then a living embodiment of this presence that, you know, we glimpse. And what we can then do is, you know, what we may find, is that this presence that we are glimpsing, that we're trying to, you know, understand and make others understand, that need to try and make sense can just disappear, and then we can just rest as is. And it goes from being something we're talking about to something that we're living. As Ali Hajweri stated, a reality with no name has now become a name with no reality. And it's whether we can reverse that. Do we need to say anything? Do we need to be anything? Do we need to fix everything, anything? Do we need to get on the pulpit and preach? Or do we need to just recognize that everything is as is? And in the sense that in that place of as is, there is this balance, there is this sobriety, and there is this ecstasy. And although it may appear as two, it is actually in fact one. And that oneness is that center from which it perceives itself. You are the center from which everything is being perceived. You are that which is prior to all of existence. And when we live in that place, we find that we naturally are able to find this balance and simply live as is.